I'd like to come to you tonight and talk about J. Frank Norris for this week's discussion board. Some of you may have already read The Strange Career of J. Frank Norris in this week's assignments by Barry Hankins. Norris was the South's leading fundamentalist, according to Hankins. The Department of History at Liberty University affirms a biblical worldview, and tonight I'm going to choose that Jesus Christ is central in human history. Practically speaking, fundamentalists believe Jesus and the Bible were core conservative beliefs. The gospel was more important than any program, and the Bible was the authority. Leonard Beale, in his book Baptists in America, stated that Norris was the most colorful and controversial fundamentalist. He was known for his aggressive evangelism and his outlandish tactics in and out of the pulpit. He was the pastor at Fort Worth First Baptist Church for 43 years, and then for 16 years he was known as the Flying Pastor, as he pastored both in Fort Worth and Detroit, Michigan at the Temple Baptist Church. Some say that he had a megachurch before the term was ever coined, because at one time in the 1940s his combined congregation was 25,000 congregants. He was instrumental also in the independent Baptist movement, developed around his second nickname, the Texas Tornado. Norris knew he could attack liberalism through the church and government through the media. Before he pastored the First Baptist Church at Fort Worth, he was the editor of the Baptist Standard. And then he founded Fence Rail in 1917, changed the name to Searchlight in the 1920s. It became known as the Baptist Fundamentalist of Texas in 1927, and later became known just as the Fundamentalist, as he became disillusioned with the Baptists that were dissenting. He was the co-founder of the Baptist Bible Union in 1923, and he helped to found the World Fundamental Baptist Missionary Fellowship, now known as the World Baptist Fellowship, in 1930. In 1939, he founded the Fundamental Baptist Bible Institute, which is known as Arlington Baptist College now. John Rice, the famous Baptist evangelist and pastor, and the founding editor of the Sword of the Lord, and many other scholars, went through that program. As a fundamentalist, he stood against evolution and the social gospel that was proclaimed by the modernists. He was a separatist, which was an attribute of the fundamentalists. On a side note, an offshoot of Norris's separatist denomination is the Baptist Bible Fellowship, better known as the first denominational home of Jerry Falwell, our founder. Another fundamentalist attribute was millennialists believing in the visible second coming of Christ. I found two headlines in the archives and chronicles. Both of them were from 1923 and were in the New York Times. The first headline states, "Insists the Bible is right. Fundamentalist pastor announces a drive on Baptist dissenters." One of his pastimes was speaking directly to Baptist dissenters in the United States to bring about conversion or expulsion to the fundamentalist movement. He states in this article, "The Bible stands or falls upon the story of creation, every word of which must be accepted without question, else the whole structure crumbles." The second article headlines, "Dr. Norris Sees Dictatorship Now." He was against big government, and so he says in this article that if government continues to control the economic life of the nation, there will be no room left for religious freedom of worship. Imagine, in 1920, he was seeing a turn on religious worship. And so he also supported modern-day Israel and the Jews. He believed that we were not approaching a revolution, we were in one. So you can understand that he was a biblical literalist. You knew exactly where he stood. I want to leave with this quote. "I thank God for a literal Christ, for a literal salvation. There is literal sorrow, literal death, literal hell, and thank God there is a literal heaven." Thank you and have a good night.